Hello, everyone. Welcome. Today, we will be talking about AI and how it is connected to cybersecurity, or what influence does artificial intelligence actually have on cybersecurity, or rather more specifically on cyber threats. So we will be thinking through or looking through kind of the loop through the adversaries, so how they will leverage this new technology. But before we actually start, so here are some introductions or technical information rather. As you saw earlier, those who joined before, so here are some information, so how to leverage the most this webinar session. Of course, make sure that you have audio connected so that you can hear me, hopefully also see me through the video feed. All attendees are muted, so you cannot speak during the presentation, but you can always send questions in the Q&A section. There's also chat option, but the Q&A section is a bit easier for me to then see the questions, and I will check those at the end of this session. So if there are any questions, I will try to answer them, depending on how much time we have left, of course, so that we don't overstay too long or prolong it too long. And of course, this webinar is also recorded, so you will receive the recording and the presentation afterwards. Okay. Further, right. So before we kick in with the presentation itself, let's do some let's say introductions to Conscia and me. Those of you who do not know Conscia yet, so we are a group of companies that are present mostly in Europe, as you can see. We have over 1,000 employees. We have over 1,000 happy customers, and we are present actually now in seven countries. So we have a big, let's say, market presence in Europe. Those of you who do know us from the past, you could probably connect us with Cisco and our partnership that we have with Cisco. So yes, traditionally we were really focusing on the networking and IT services. So, but in the recent years, we kind of shift that focus now to the cybersecurity. So in the next slide here, I will tell you a bit about our SOC. So this shift, let's say, to cybersecurity happened about 4 years, or now it's even 5 years ago. We established our SOC in the Slovenian region at the moment. So here are the headquarters in Slovenia. We have a lot of customers here, so you can see some of the statistics already written in the slide, so I don't need to read that out loud. But basically, we're really growing fast, so we have a lot of dedicated cybersecurity experts in our security operations center. We have dedicated teams, divisions within the SOC. So, for example, threat intelligence from the division that I'm from is one of them. Then we have offensive security, incident response, and SecOps, and so on. So we are really growing fast in this sense, and we are also gathering more and more customers every month. Something about me. So as I said, I'm working in threat intelligence department, where I'm the principal threat intelligence analyst. I am mostly focusing recent years on the strategic and tactical threat intelligence, which is basically gathering, information, intelligence, trying to consume large data, and then find out how can we help our customers in terms of improving their cyber defenses. Because if we can kind of predict who might be the threats, so cyber threats to our customers, we can then analyze their profiles. We can then analyze their operations, so how they operate and what techniques and tactics they use. And this information is really great to construct good cyber defense. So this is kind of the output then from such work. Apart from that, I'm also the main content writer for our threat intelligence newsletter, which you can see the QR code below, which I welcome you also to scan, because this CTI newsletter is really focused on the European area. In my opinion, there are a lot of great cybersecurity newsletters, but often they try to cover, global events. So, and when we talk global, then it is almost always, USA and more like China and Asian areas. So often the European, let's say, area is not that well covered. So that's why I decided to kind of introduce this product, which focuses on the European area. So hopefully this will be useful for you too. And then, of course, I also manage some of the products in this the cyber threat intelligence portfolio. So I'm also kind of product owner of the CTI solutions. With that said, I suggest that we kick off with our webinar. So as I said, today we will be talking about this new fancy technology, fancy buzzword, artificial intelligence, that is now used almost everywhere. And I would like to say that even in this presentation, I will a bit abuse the word artificial intelligence in order to convey also some of the actually subcategories of artificial intelligence, so that we do not confuse a lot of stuff like machine learning and LLMs and such stuff. So I would rather use AI in this context, so that you also understand that I'm encompassing all of those subcategories and fields in the AI. When we think a bit back, so we're trying to understand today. We want to understand who will be, faster in adapting this new technology. Why are we interested in that? Is if we look a bit back. So in the past, there were always kind of two sides in cybersecurity. That's why I have here an icon of a mouse and a cat, because basically in the past and even today, we can consider this cybersecurity game like a cat and mouse game. Sometimes the mouse is faster, sometimes the cat is faster. So it is interesting to see and observe how this actually evolved from the past. So this kind of game, and I consider few technical milestones in the past that had significant impact also on cybersecurity, and there are many of them. I have picked only 3 for this presentation, just to give us an idea that this actually exists. So we will see those now. And for each of these technical milestones, we will try to think, what was the action that adversaries, so the hackers, used to kind of trying to abuse that technology, and how did we usually then fend them off, or rather defend against such threats. So I would start with the first technological milestone, and this is really primitive. So it is let's say, the appearance of personal computing. What this means is, what I mean with that is basically that PCs have become, have become present in most of households, even. So not only in organizations, but also in households. So now everyone, this is the time when everyone had PCs or started to getting those PCs. And if we reflect back now, so how did hackers try to abuse that, or what did they do in the start, let's say, of this digital journey in overall, is that they basically tried to write some viruses on floppy disks. So yeah, physical floppies back then, viruses were installed or rather written onto the physical floppy disk, and it meant that they, in order to infect someone or a PC or a machine, they would need physical access to that machine and insert that floppy disk inside, and then only they could infect it. So it was not that advanced, but it was it was something like, let's say, amateur hacking back then. And if you try to think of, what would be a good counterpoint or, counteraction against it, or defense against that, there are many, but I always pick one in this presentation. So in this case, I picked, physical security, for example, was already sufficient. So since the viruses were on floppy disks, they would need to insert them in the machine itself, so physically. And if you have some physical security, even at home, if you have your doors locked, it's already a good countermeasure against that. So this is really primitive beginning stuff. Later on, we have, let's say, another technological milestone, which is the availability of the internet. So the internet starts to become available to most households, most organizations, and so on. So now if we try to think of how hackers would use this technology, well, they would try to improve what they did before. So they had viruses on floppies, and the issue was they would need to be present, to infect a machine. With the internet, they can now abuse this, that they do not need physical presence anymore. So one of the attack vectors that becomes relevant is phishing. So phishing starts to become relevant as people start to get their also email clients and so on. So now hackers figure out, okay, well, actually, I don't need to be really present now. I can try to send scam email or phishing email in this case to do harm to the target that I want to abuse. And one of the defensive sides or countermeasures against that is, let's say, also firewalls. And later on, of course, not only firewalls, we will have the ability, to inspect emails, and there will be some tools that can also, give us some clue that this might be potentially a malicious email or rather phishing. So again, kind of adaptation of the new technological milestone. Next technological milestone is probably I picked global digitalization. There were maybe a few before that, but I kind of now shifted to the modern era. So when companies started to digitalize their assets, moving to the cloud and such. So their also crown jewels are now maybe also accessible digitally, not under physical papers and such. And now when we think about the process of digitalization, it is not that easy. So the transformation for average or most companies is not that easy. What that means is that they would need some help, and they would get help from different IT service providers, IT integrators, cloud providers, and so on. So what this introduces for the attackers is another option. So if, for example, if an attacker wanted to target a specific company, and that company had sufficient defenses so that the hacker could not infiltrate, that environment. Well, now they have an option, since this same organization works with different providers, so third-party providers. Maybe one of those is weak to their attacks, so they might, exploit the weaknesses of the supply chain providers. And with that said, we see a new, let's say, cyber threat trend, which is basically supply chain attacks. So the hackers know, okay, it is hard to, directly harm the target organization or company, but they know that they work with different third-party suppliers, and maybe they find out that one of those is, susceptible to their attacks and have connection to the, of course, the target environment, and thus this will be an easier attack chain via supply chain attack. And the countermeasure to that is, there are more, but in general, I will try to sum them up in kind of this zero trust idea, so zero trust architecture, which basically kind of states different stuff, like, for example, we should abide to principle of least privilege. We should have good access privilege controls, limit, the access to our assets from third-party suppliers, and so on. So kind of the zero trust idea is a good countermeasure for supply chain attacks. And this is kind of the three milestones that I picked. As I said, there might be more, of course there are, and you guys might even know some, but I picked those three just to give an idea that there were always somehow hackers trying to abuse a new milestone for their advantage, for improving their attacks and so on. And since we are now on a kind of break of a new major technological milestone, which is artificial intelligence, we should be curious about, how they will now use this new technology, to improve their attacks, or if they will be faster than us in this case. And for that reason, I kind of prepared this graph, which is basically a simulation of adaptation. So between the, let's say, I call them two poles. So one is the offensive pole and the other one is defensive pole. So the defensive one is the blue line and the offensive one is the dark line. And basically, they both depict how fast or when did we start to implement, artificial intelligence into our areas. So either defense and offense. And as you can see on the blue line, we already see in the past, there are already some adaptations of certain, elements of AI. This does not mean, breakthrough AI technology like we might have today, but some elements or subcategories of that AI that were already implemented in certain products, and these products are then used in organizations or companies. So, because of course, AI is not really new. So the research on AI goes, 10 and 20 years ago and even more, of course. So it is not new, but the new trend is adapting it into the products and technology that we use today. So that's why we see in the blue line already in the past already has certain adaptations. And curious enough, on the black line, or the dark line rather, we do not see any or not as much activity in terms of integrating AI into cyber attacks. And there is a good reason why is that so. So in my research, so in my opinion, is that basically the attackers or the hackers did not need to implement AI into their attacks. And this is because even without the AI's help, they were already sufficient, they were already good enough, they managed to cause harm, they managed to get their goals without it. So this is one aspect. And the other one is, well, it is not that simple to suddenly integrate some artificial intelligence into, malware and into cyber attack processes. So this is not a simple task. It requires a lot of research. It requires a lot of technical expertise and so on. So definitely not easy. And if it is not easy, it means it requires heavy investment with money, and also investment in time. And since it was not really needed, well, this investment did not make sense. There was no really return on that investment for the hackers, so they didn't implement it. Of course, we see some movement on that line, and there is a significant exponential raise of the implementation of artificial intelligence in the cyber attacks, and we can kind of assume what the date was. So that's basically the release of ChatGPT. This line where we see cyber attacks already kind of implementing some sort of AI, whether in the attack itself or using the bots or using kind of the co-pilot features in the development of malicious software and so on, this kind of reflects the date where the ChatGPT started to become publicly available. And why is, if we ask ourselves, why is that so? ChatGPT was basically a product that introduced AI in a way, so AI, artificial intelligence, these words, to mass public. So people started to, recognize what AI is. Not only technical people, but regular people who are not from technical field, who did not know about AI before. They were, let's say, not even aware what the word meant. They were just thinking this is some fantasy, right? Now with ChatGPT, they could use it in a product that is kind of, let's say, user-friendly enough for them to embrace that the AI exists and how awesome it is. In the past, we might have used words like, okay, if you don't know something, can you just Google it? Just ask Google, right? But today we hear more and more, why don't you ask ChatGPT, right? So it kind of consumed, the world basically. So ChatGPT really introduced AI to the world, and people were interested. People were impressed with it. And if people are impressed, they're usually willing to, purchase such products that include these features. So willing to invest their money into it. And of course, then the economic people, investors start to smell that and start to invest into AI startups. And this whole kind of domino effect, introduces basically a lot of research being done into AI, a lot of development being invested into AI. And this research and this development also becomes publicly available. Some are free, research papers and such. And from the hacker's perspective, all of this means, well, it is no longer really needed. They don't need that much of technological skill to now implement AI, because a lot of the research is already done and publicly available. There are a lot of products that serve as an example how you can use that. And so they just need some time still to integrate it, but this time is all, again, much, much shorter. So the return of investment into implementing AI into their cyber attacks is now much, much bigger, basically. And they're kind of also a bit forced to do so, because with the ChatGPT break, Also, organizations and vendors started to introduce more aggressively the AI features, which fend off a lot of cyber attacks that were not using them. So they were kind of also forced to do that. So hackers were forced to adapt AI in order to fight better. And this is kind of now where we are. Now we acknowledge that, okay, hackers are aware of AI. There is a lot of research available. Suddenly it makes sense investing into time and money into integrating AI technology into cyber attacks. So now we move forward. Again, we are now shifting into the hacker's mindset, okay? And maybe some of you recognize these phases here. These phases are from Cyber Kill Chain. And why is Cyber Kill Chain really good? It is basically showing us the steps that are needed to be done in order to complete successfully an attack. So these are the steps that need to be done for hackers. And if we put ourselves in the hacker's mindset, so these are their jobs basically. They need to complete each of these steps in order to be successful with their attacks. And now, when they think, okay, how should I use this AI? Okay, there are a lot of steps in the cyber kill chain, right? Or our cyber attack. So where should we use first? And I intentionally divided this into two rows, because the first one, the orange phases, are basically pre-intrusion. So these are the attacks needed before they actually infiltrate the environment, before they intrude the environment. And the bottom part, the gray one, is post-intrusion steps that they do. So if you think like hackers do, there is a big shield or issue for them in pre-intrusion phase, basically between the phases. So when they want to intrude the environment, so this is kind of showing up as a difficult part. And of course, if you think like hackers, or even if you think like a business, you would try to probably improve the efficiency or improve in general the phases where you're weakest at, or which provide you the hardest time in your business, or in the terms of hackers during their cyber attack. So we have firewalls, we have antiviruses. These are getting like next gen and such. So they are really good. So the preventive measures are really good. So it is maybe quite hard now to infiltrate the environment, and thus hackers think, okay, maybe we should try to leverage AI in this case. And moving on, so if we figured out that hardest nut to crack is basically getting the foothold into the environment, we call that basically initial access. And now that we are aware that hackers, okay, we need to improve our initial access, well, let's think about what methods do they use, what are the typical techniques and tactics they usually use for initial access. And I'm sure that at least for one of them, I will point out two, the biggest two here that are mostly used. One of them we are all aware of, and this is basically social engineering on one side. So social engineering, or let's say phishing, is something that we already experienced probably, and it is one of the top, probably number one, initial access vector used. So this is one of them. And on the other side, the second, or at least in the top two category, is exploit. So exploitation, so exploit development for initial access. So basically exploiting an existing vulnerability in order to get foothold into the environment. Okay, great. So hackers now know we want to improve our social engineering attacks or techniques and exploit development techniques. And again, if we're staying in this mindset of a hacker, we would need to now define, well, what are the difficulties of each of these? So what can we improve? What are the current difficulties? And if we think about social engineering, especially for me, so I'm not sure from where you guys are, but in Slovenia, I'm from Slovenia, it was really hard to create a sophisticated phishing email, basically because of the language itself. So Slovenian language is not that well represented or known around the globe. And this also means that basically hackers could not write really convincing phishing emails. And if you see some, mistakes, obvious mistakes in Slovenian language coming supposedly from my boss or from an institution, government institution in Slovenia that tries to trick, in this case, tries to trick me. Well, I know that they wouldn't write such rubbish Slovenian language sentences and so on. So this would give us a big clue that this might be phishing, and this actually proves to be an issue overall for phishing attacks. So basically to trying to have a convincing content. Of course, yeah, convincing and believable, it is kind of synonymous. And of course, the content accuracy is also crucial. So having the knowledge, about the either person or organization that the hackers try to impersonate is also important. So these are kind of the main struggle points of existing phishing or social engineering technologies, especially when we talk about foreign languages. So not so much maybe in English, but definitely in some of the languages that are not that well represented. And of course, making this on scale. And now if we shift the same thoughts to exploit development. So what are the issues with exploit development? What are the kind of, what do they struggle with, the hackers, right? Definitely exploit development is really hard. It is hard to develop an exploit from technical perspective, because usually you would really need to know the products that you try to exploit. Either this is application, server, and so on. In most cases, you would require even some reverse engineering skills, which are really hard, in order to find some loopholes in the code to find a bug and exploit that bug to get later on the access to the environment. So it is definitely requiring a lot of advanced technical skills. It requires a lot of time, so researching the product that you want to find a weakness for and so on. And on the other hand, the vendors themselves are quite, getting better with patching process. So they introduce patches to vulnerabilities really fast. So it is kind of the struggle for hackers. Then, okay, we invested, months to develop this exploit, and now they patch it in a few days or even a month. It's already fast. They cannot really leverage it. So these are the two top initial access techniques that hackers use. We identified what are kind of their struggling with. They know now that they have AI technology in their hands, basically. And perhaps now they question themselves, so hackers question themselves, can AI help us with this? And maybe let's now explore this thought. So for initial access, we have already few options existing. And on this screenshot, you may see, you may notice that it is quite familiar. The UI, the user interface, might be familiar to you if you ever used ChatGPT. But I can tell you that this is not actually ChatGPT. It is another tool. It's a malicious tool that is called WarmGPT. And WarmGPT is basically very much the same as ChatGPT. Just imagine that the safety filters that OpenAI implements are basically on off. So you can abuse it, you can use it for malicious means. And in this example here, it's in English, but it basically requests to write business email compromise sample of email, so business email compromise attack. And with few, points to whom should it be addressed and what should it do. And this is very short, but it just to prove the point that it's really, you know how fast it is. It is just a few seconds in order to get a really good, convincing phishing email with the help of WarmGPT. And I think you can, or all of us who already experimented with ChatGPT, we know that even ChatGPT in Slovenian language provides a really good content. It's very hard to distinguish if this is, false or not. So it's really good in that term where the content needs to be convincing and believable. So the language barrier no longer exists. And moreover, it generates basically the whole phishing template for you in just mere seconds. So this is the use of AI in phishing. And next, I would like to show you now a short clip, and we won't watch the whole one, but just to give you the sense what's happening here. So let's just observe it a bit for a few seconds, and then we will discuss it.
Have you ever had, maybe you're in that place right now where you want to turn your life around, and somewhere deep in your soul, there could be some decisions that you have to make. Like, it's like something was decided for you, And instead of trying to make something that is...
Okay, so as I said, we won't watch the whole clip, but just try to imagine, or not imagine, actually, I will tell you. This clip here was generated by AI. So actually what was needed to generate this clip, this person is not even real. So in the left corner here, you can see in the bottom left corner of the clip, you can see a picture, a profile picture. This is a necessary input for this software. And one other input that is required is a 1-minute audio clip. And combined, these two inputs provide you with the video that you just saw. So you could see the realistic face, realistic mimics of, how the mouth moves, how the head moves, and so on. So emotions are kind of represented, and it's all artificial. And the image actually here, the profile, is also generated by DALL-E. So basically the AI tool that generates image based on your text input. So everything here is fake, but it really looks convincing. And this is the introduction of so-called deepfake technology, or basically deepfake attacks that hackers use. And I call them basically like a next generation of social engineering. So this is the advanced form of using artificial intelligence in terms of phishing, in the context of phishing. So this will be really interesting. And there are already examples of attacks using that. Moving on, just to mention also the exploit development. So a few months ago, there were security researchers who managed to adapt a GPT-4 model. GPT-4 is the model that ChatGPT uses at the moment. So they could adapt that model so that it could develop an exploit just based on reading a threat advisory. So basically, such, let's say, adjusted GPT model can be used, or rather abused, to develop an exploit for a one-day vulnerability. And what one-day vulnerability means is that there is awareness by the vendor of the vulnerability in their product. They release the advisory, and usually when the advisory is also released, there are some mitigation steps listed, or even already patch available. And all of these text and all of this information about mitigations and patch, you can input to this adjusted GPT-4, and they can develop an exploit for you in very short time. And this is a really, truly, I would not like to say amazing feature, because it can be abused in a very bad way. And if this comes into the hackers' hands, if they can start to abuse this, well, all of the organizations will have really hard time, by defending themselves. Current success rate is above 80%. So when they were doing this test, and I assume they can improve that, or hackers rather will try to improve that. So this is really worrying, and we will put a lot of focus on that. So how to address this attack vector. Okay, so one other side effect. Now we discussed, initial access, how they improved social engineering, how they improved exploit development, but in all of that, while hackers are investing, time and research and, into integrating those AI features to improve those two techniques, there was a side effect that occurred, because, as AI is able to kind of, let's say, assist us with code development, so software development, it is also available for the hackers. And now they can iterate each software cycle really much faster. So the code development, or rather product releases, are much faster. And what appears is the availability of so-called, at least I call them, plug and play models. So we are aware of phishing kits, ransomware kits, and so on. And now in this case, basically, these are even more simplified. So now you will see that there is basically just a start button the hacker needs to press, and it initiates the whole attack. So, or let's say a ransomware attack. In this case, you press start, right? And this is concerning, because such tools are now being massively available. And if there's a lot of products available, the prices are getting lower. The competition is bigger, so the prices are getting lower. And this introduces what I call the effect of amateur hackers. So now, if you only have, let's say, 100 euros in your pockets, or even less, you could easily purchase a ransomware kit, which is a plug and play model where the only technical skill you need is basically to press the start button, and of course, a way to purchase this kit, because usually it requires bitcoins and cryptocurrency to do so. So these are the only skills that a hacker needs to conduct a very serious attack. And this is kind of then a bit of another concerning threat with which AI influences. So the appearance of these amateur hackers by abusing these plug-and-play models. And we will see this picture a bit later on, but this is one example of where we reverse engineered such a code, and where you can see how the button is actually being created, the button start in the code itself. Okay, what tools are available to them now? I won't spend a lot of time here because we already mentioned a few. So we have here Warp GPT, Evil GPT, and there are a lot of variations of this GPT stuff, and they're all adjusted to some specific costs. So let's say Fraud GPT also exists, and this Fraud GPT is really dedicated for the attacks on financial sector, and others are then dedicated to other industries. And these are all then available on marketplaces, on the dark web. So you can see one example here where they're selling botnets and malware on the dark web. Now, you would be interested probably, okay, we are aware that they are improving their initial access stuff. And I was thinking, okay, that makes sense. So they want to improve social engineering, they want to improve exploit development. Makes sense. These are the top attack vectors. They're having, troubles with accessing our environments, and these top attack vectors need to be improved. And AI proves to be efficient, a good answer to that. But what is the overall effect of malicious AI? And I listed here a few examples. So, okay, of course, password cracking, chatbots, bypassing traditional security measures, automation, automated attacks, and like we said, patching and versus exploitation. So much faster exploit development versus time to patch. One interesting example here is that, for example, companies usually take, what was in IBM report 2 years ago, actually, it was 60 days on average that the company needs to patch certain software. And even if we assume that we are much faster than that, still, we learned that there is a adjusted GPT-4 tool capable of developing an exploit in just a few, let's say, minutes even, because and it takes maybe 2 days to weaponize it, actually. So they can conduct a really serious cyber attack very fast by abusing this AI technology. And when I was thinking about that, about all of these attack vectors here, or let's say techniques, what is kind of the common grouping of them? And I came to the conclusion, basically, they all focus on the speed of the attacks. So they kind of enable much higher speed of the attacks, because now you can develop an exploit very fast. In ransomware cases, now they can employ a malicious AI chatbot that handles the negotiation part of the ransomware attack. And we should not underestimate that, because the negotiation part of the whole ransomware chain attack is kind of the most annoying one for the hackers. Usually, they need to adapt to the English language, and sometimes they are not that knowledgeable of that English language. So typing with the victim, maybe sometimes even victim does not know good English. So this is then an issue between the communication. But hackers, ransomware group still needs to kind of appoint some time to this negotiation phase. They need to, negotiate the price. They need that money, And chatbots seem to be a really, really cool solution for them, because now they can leave that to this AI chatbot. All of the negotiation phase, they teach it, what are the limits, which sum of money is acceptable for them, and some other inputs. And they can teach such a chatbot to be really adjusted for their negotiation phase. And once they're successful in exfiltrating and encrypting the systems, they can focus on next attack and leave the chatbot to discuss with the victim. And this is the huge improvement in speed, right? So they can now conduct more ransomware attacks, because they no longer need to really have dedicated customer support, like they call people that handle these talks with the victims, which kind of then slow down the attacks. So speed is kind of the effect of using malicious AI. And with speed, it comes also scale. That's why I put 2 words, because if you can attack more often, it means that there will be more attacks also with that, and especially if they're automated in one of those cases. Okay, so some examples. I will try to go fast a bit through them, because now they are a bit maybe already also you know about them. For the deepfake technology, there was one typical very noticeable cyber attack. It occurred in Hong Kong, and it happened so that someone from financial department receive a basically email from their CFO, so their boss, to transact certain, like it says 25 million to a certain bank account. And of course, they didn't believe that. Usually, it's not maybe conducted through email, or it's rather fishy, that such a big sum of money is requested by email, to be performed. So they ignored it. They ignored the email. They thought it is phishing. So, okay, report it is phishing, and that's it. But 2 days later, again, another email came from the CFO's account. Well, now they're inviting this person to a conference call. So live conference call, live video conference call. And now, of course, they join this conference call. And to their surprise, they actually see the CFO, that some other colleagues were present. And again, they were reiterating, hey, dude, why didn't you do what we asked? I asked you to, to perform this transaction of 25 million to this bank account. Suddenly, this person from financial department had no longer an excuse. They saw their boss and some of their colleagues reiterating the same thing as in the email, and they completed the transaction. Only it was a week later that they recognized this was actually a phishing attack, so by using the deepfake technology. So it was already that convincing in a live conference call. So this was an amazing story from the wild. Okay, this is just an example of what we call a dropper, so a malicious software which was reverse engineered to see how it looks, and by doing a meta-analysis, it was metadata analysis. It was really noticeable that it was developed by LLM tools. So just an example of such a malicious code development already occurring. And as I said, this screenshot we already saw in the section of plug and play models, where I said that the start button is now the thing. So you just need to press start and it starts the whole ransomware attack, for example. Again, this actually happened. So we had such an example here. And while we obtained the code, so the malicious sample in this ransomware attack, so the victim already called us when it was unfortunately too late. Their systems were encrypted and so on. So, but they still needed help, because the threat actors threatened basically to expose the stolen data. And of course, while we were performing our negotiation part, so delaying and so on, while we were doing the ransomware analysis, so reverse engineering, we kind of concluded basically that this might be actually amateur hackers behind it. And we suspected that the exfiltration was not successful. And once we recognized also this button start and so on, this kind of give us more clue that this is a plug and play model probably used. And since the negotiation part, which we were also handling, we noticed that they were not really well experienced. It is a bit hard to describe verbally without disclosing too much, but it was really noticeable that they were not proficient in that. Even their chat system was, kind of lagging. Sometimes it wasn't accessible and so on. So that was an issue. So we kind of basically managed to conclude that, okay, these are, they probably didn't even exfiltrate because unfortunately the customer in this case did not have very good sensors. So we couldn't, prove with that if exfiltration was successful or not. But throughout the reverse engineering of the sample and the negotiation phase, we managed to kind of conclude that actually they didn't exfiltrate data, and it turned out to be true. And this was our clue, our first practical clue, that there are these amateur hackers out there now using these kind of very easy plug and play models out there. And we also kind of assume that these AI chatbots, malicious chatbots, will be really, really helpful in the future for them, because you see, we kind of managed to, only through negotiations, that's already figure out that they were having some issues or with exfiltration and so on. And now, okay, let's close it out now a bit with what we can expect in the future. I assume that maybe some, media would like to tell you that there will be a malicious AI that will, destroy us all. That we are doomed. There is no salvation for us. And I would rather argue that and propose another idea where I think that AI will actually be adapted, at least in malicious terms, in phases. I try to divide it in kind of 3 phases, where one of the first ones would be definitely the attack success rate, which we are exploring already now. So, we identified that, okay, initial access is something that hackers are a bit struggling with. So it makes sense that they invest time and skills to adapt AI into improving those. So initial access techniques like social engineering, like exploit development. And this is that at improving those attack success rates, which they were having issues. So this is one phase that is already ongoing. And the next phase is basically what we are already experiencing now. So scale and speed, the effects of using AI in a malicious way introduces the ability, to perform automated attacks, to leave negotiations to chatbots, to use plug and play models, which are basically pressing start and now you're a hacker, right? Introduces scale and speed. This is the next phase, which we are kind of now slowly transitioning into. And finally, the last phase, which might be a bit further in the future, is actual usage of the advanced AI, advanced AI malware, which basically means, malware that kind of has features of AI in itself, so in the code. So imagine that it becomes, it is dropped, it is installed on the victim machine, such malware, and now it is capable of, all of the stuff that makes sense. So like detecting where the malware is, which victim machine, where is that in the network, what kind of privilege does it have, what kind of user account it has access to, what is the shortest path to the end goal of the hacker. This should all be built into the malware in order to kind of limit the requirement of the C2, so the command and control communication. So to provide less noise, which means this malware will be more evasive. And if I would be doing this implementation, I would also make sure that the machine learning models are also capable of detecting the security tools and evade them. So this is kind of the things that I expect from advanced AI malware in the future. And of course, the next thing for us is to ask, how do we fight back? How do we, stand our ground against such, evolution? And if we start from the beginning, so the first phase, so attack success rates, of course, we saw the phishing is really getting sophisticated, especially using the deepfake technology. So what helps most against phishing is, of course, still a lot of focus on educating our employees, who they need to be aware of these new advancements in AI phishing. They need to be aware that, okay, this can now look really convincing, believable, and especially deepfake technology. And if we think about, deepfake technology, how do you, deal with that? I would say that there should be some safety features built into the video conferencing calls, either to limit, joining the conference call from some certain geolocations, that you would not expect, executive or anyone to join from. Maybe some watermarking features to uniquely identify this person, or improve our, policies, company policies, to include some unique identifiers for at least executive people. Maybe a question and an answer to that question that only people who are working in the company should know about because it is in the policy. And this could be already some sort of sufficient identifier for that. And for the exploit development, of course, it will be hard to fight, that high speed, but still we would need to manage better our vulnerabilities, or rather, employ some threat intelligence in this case to understand the threats, to who understands that, and maybe even if they abuse or so exploit our tools or products and gain the access, if you know your threat, what they would do as a next step, what techniques and tactics they would use as next steps, you can improve your defenses on that. So maybe even if they get this initial access with the exploit development, because of how fast-paced is it, you can block them to do harm further. So, repel them out afterwards. And then if we move to the scale and speed, of course, automated attacks, we need to have some automation on our hands to fend off the most of them. So AI in security tools will be important, so that the AI kind of handles the low fidelity attacks, so the obvious ones, so that, for example, analysts or IT engineers don't need to spend time on looking into them. It will be really great to have also automated playbooks to handle that, so to remove the low fidelity alerts or close them by themselves, because most of them will maybe intentionally try to cause noise in certain areas of our IT environment while they're trying to, sneakily attack the other part. So automated playbooks should help us there. And of course, again, usage of really validated indicators of compromise, which will expose those high fidelity attacks. And finally, the last step, so the advanced AI implementations. Well, I think that the traditional, detection mechanisms, they need to be improved, but they won't be sufficient alone. The detection mechanisms in the sense of reaction, so waiting for an alert to occur and then investigate, this will be too slow, because even as we suppose that the AI malware will be constructed or built or developed in a way that it will have a feature to evade these detections, well, such reactive detection won't be sufficient in this case. We would need to employ more proactive investigations like threat hunting. So we assume breach, and then we find some breadcrumbs in our environments that could indicate this breach. So we should employ this on a regular basis, so like automated threat hunting sessions. And of course, red teaming is also a proactive engagement where we try to understand our weaknesses in environments. So if we assume breach, what will hacker try to do to reach those crown jewels in our environment, for example, and what are the gaps that we have, the weaknesses that we have on that path in terms of detection and protection. And of course, if the incident does happen, we should have an incident response plan ready for such case. And this is probably valid for all of the phases and overall in the cyber attack chains or other cyber attack scenarios. I think I can wrap this up here. And of course, like I said, so this here is my email, guys. So if anyone has any questions or you want to reach out, if I maybe didn't see all of the questions here, please feel free to send the email on this to me actually. And if you have some more, business-like questions, maybe reach out to our account managers also to book additional sessions and we can discuss these advanced techniques that are waiting for us. And of course, what Conscia offers in terms of helping you on this journey to fend off these nasty cyber attacks that are coming in the future. I hope you guys learned something, so I appreciate your time, and I will give you back the rest of the time for the day. Thank you very much again, and goodbye.